Okay, screw it. Okay, we're going to get started. I'm happy all you guys finally tolerated to be here this long. I think they maybe put this class at the end of the day. I know a lot of people are like, I want to go home, but I want to be for class. And my daughter's like, man, we only sell solar panels after your class. We sell little portable solar panels. I'm not going to be too worried about it. So the goal of this class is kind of give you guys an overview of what solar can and can't do and how much it does cost or doesn't cost. I recommend that if you have your cell phone with you, you pull it out because we're going to do some live stuff on your cell phone so you can see that I'm not full of crap. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of some of the components, but really in an hour and a half time slot, it doesn't really give us a chance to do a lot of stuff. The first time I taught this class was on my own off-grid homestead a couple months after COVID started, back when everyone had a reason to kind of still be a little worried about what was going on. And the class was supposed to be an hour long, and I kind of started getting frustrated because people were getting up and using the restroom all the time. And I'm like, do they really want to see if an off-grid bathroom works? I didn't quite really realize what the deal was. And my wife let me know that at the end of the hour class, it was 3 hours long. So, and my reply was, wow, I need to charge a little bit more for this class. To give you a rundown of the system that I currently live in, we have almost 12K worth of solar panels. If you could see all our pictures on Facebook if you have a Facebook account. If you search Bean Tree Homestead and grab a business card from me, it's listed on there. We have a 3,000 pound roughly forklift battery in our basement. This is not how I'd recommend doing it for most of you or all of you, or even I'd want to do it again that way. Mainly because the forklift battery requires you to keep water in it, maintain it, and also give it ability to off gas, because for a wet cell battery, one of the byproducts of energy production is hydrogen, and hydrogen goes boom boom pretty easily, so you have to have it set up where you could ventilate it for the gas it produces. I have 4 daughters. I jokingly make sure I told this part because 4 daughters actually give everyone an idea of what electrical load could probably sound like or look like. So if I say, yeah, I have a stand-up refrigerator freezer in the kitchen, and I have 2 lay-down freezers because we do processing our own meat, raising, breeding, grazing, prosciutto, coal smoking, the whole shebang. And then I say, then we have 2 additional freezers for situational use based on the seasons, what we're doing. Everyone's like, yeah. And then when I say, well, I have 4 daughters, I'm like, wow. They all of a sudden know I have this huge load, right? We have a microwave, we have air fryer, we have a Vivor vacuum, chamber vacuum sealer. And I tell people, if you come into my house and you're thinking that there's a certain way we live based on like a 1980s vision of off-grid, you're going to be disappointed. You'll be bored in about 10 minutes, okay? Because really there's not a lot we go without. The one thing we do go without with it is central air and heating, but there's ways around that work just as well, I believe, in my opinion. And then my wife, we've never really bothered hooking up an LP dryer because since we heat with wood and we do have a really good sized front covered porch, we just dry everything that way. And it forces my kids to have to plan when they get their clothes washed if they want to wear it. So they have some forethought, like, it's going to take at least a day for this to dry next to the wood stove. So that is, our well is almost 400 feet in the ground. You can imagine the load it'd be if somebody wanted to flush the toilet in the middle of the night to pump water 400 feet in the ground back into the house. So what we have is we have a septic system or a septic tank that holds like a cistern that holds our water that we pump out of the ground. And then we have a shallow well pump that we use to pressurize the lines in the house. Okay, so this system comprises of almost 12K worth of panels, 358 amp, 48 volt battery in the basement, and then we have the inverters, chargers, and charge controllers, and all together about 5 years ago roughly, we're fully off-grid for $16,000. Okay, it has gotten a lot cheaper since then. Batteries have come down in price ridiculously. If you use a wet cell battery, you never draw it down ideally past 50%, so you have to size it 50% bigger than you need. I can tell you right now, a lithium battery, we had our lithium battery shipped to a terminal We had to pick it up with a car hauler, and it was about $6,000 for the whole thing. I can tell you for about $1,000 to $2,000 now in lithium will supply the same amount of capacity. It takes up a quarter amount of the space, quarter amount of the weight, and doesn't need to be watered or anything. And it also has, most of them come with 10-year warranties, and they're made to run a lot longer. So lithium is definitely a way to go. We have a classroom where we teach our solar. We have same classroom we teach beekeeping to kids for homeschool. That will all be a lithium system. And then also when we do the greenhouse in the snow, that will also all be a lithium system. So I don't see any reason to ever go back to wet cell, especially for homeowners. Matter of fact, when I would talk about it to regular Joe Schmoes or regular normies, they'd kind of chuckle because you knew that they would probably never water this battery, and so it's just not going to get around. Now, as I present stuff here, we're going to go through a lot of things. If you have questions, put your hands up. I'm hoping that about 75% of the time you spend here is me actually just answering questions, because we won't have the time to actually get into the nitty-gritty stuff. I do consultations, and when I do classes, I keep saying do, when I happen to do classes, I'm hoping to come back up here to do some. When we do classes at that I offer, we do them at my off-grid homestead. We'll be posting the dates on our Facebook page. Do not send me a friend request for me personally. All I use that page, my Facebook page, is to harass people as a troll. So make sure you send it to my Facebook page or Bean Tree Homesteading if you're looking for questions. I have no interest I never try to sell anybody anything. That's not my goal. My goal is to get you self-reliant. My goal is to convey knowledge to you. If we end up doing a consultation at your house, the last house I did was a house that someone bought that was an Amish house that had no electricity. My goal is that you understand your system just as well as I do when I leave. The last one that I did, the gentleman gave me a number to work with. I helped him design a system under that number. By the time we were done, he understood everything I did. He blew right through that number because he knew what it could do and he knew what he wanted to do. And I wasn't even a part of him designing the final system. He knew enough to do it on his own. But the concepts he picked up during the consultation. I think at the time for him, I think I charged him like $350. And we still spent 3 hours at his place prior to looking at the site and spent 4 hours after I got there to talk about the system in itself and the realities of it. Solar, I jokingly say that the left hates guns for the same reason the right hates solar panels, because they're both educated by the same people for the same reason. So they disempower them. Most of the pushback I get on solar on Facebook are typically people who would probably call themselves right-leaning. And rightly so. They're concerned about a lot of the false money that makes this what it is, right? The old adage is if you put the Fed in charge of the deserts, we'd have a sand shortage. And so I spent a lot of time like, well, wouldn't you like to be self-reliant? Wouldn't you? And I'm not a greenie. If anybody knows what an anarcho-capitalist is, that's me. The thing is, does it make money? Does it make me reliant? Can I use it to not have to budget things for my 401k? You talked about it in the legacy class. Our current retirement program says you need to save a certain amount of unknown money to pay a certain amount of unknown taxes to buy a certain amount of unknown goods after a certain amount of inflation based upon how many certain amount of unknown wars. That doesn't work for me. I know forever and ever I'll never have to budget for electricity. And I also know it's something I don't have to be concerned about. So as homesteaders, one of the goals we should start working on is like, what is it that if I do now, I don't have to budget for as I retire? And get out of that retirement program type system, that traditional. And I'm not talking about getting rid of your 401ks or anything like that, but I'm just saying you want to become more self-reliant where the market doesn't hit you, where you can literally go home and like, I hear we're having power outages or power problems. I hear we're, California or whatever. I don't really care. It doesn't impact me. I'm not interested. I got better. I got a cow that's caffeine, or I got a pig that's furrowing that I need to be worried about, or I got swarms I need to be concerned about. I can really care less about electricity. Okay, so there's an overview of our system. We put it in all ourselves, which is the trick when it comes to solar. Affordability of panels. I think right now, if you were to buy, and this isn't an ad, I'm just trying to lay it down for you. If you were to buy, I sell like 315 watt panels. If you're to buy 10 or more, they're $100. Really, if you're spending more than 33 cents a watt on a solar panel, you're spending too much money. And now they're even getting that way with new ones. But the problem is, if tariffs coming in, I don't know how things are going to work, but if that being the case, there's still enough used product in the market. The reason for that is that when Germany was concerned about their power, they said we're gonna financially subsidize this at a level that no one's ever seen. All the cheap Chinese companies said that's great, and then they said, yeah, but you got to pass EU standards, which are more draconian than what we have here in the United States. So it forced all the companies to actually up their game and produce quality panels at a cheap price. So the only way they could compete with each other is making them more efficient or less human hands on it. And then Germany says we're done. And you had all these cheap panels. Now, the United States never competed in that market, so our efficiency never got there. Our technology never competed with them making panels in China, because we never sold panels to Germany. And so what happened is a lot of these cheap panels came over to the United States. And when I say cheap, I mean price as in what it required to make them, not in quality, okay? So they came over to our shores, and it was the first time where you had the solar industry saying, look, we can install solar on a house cheaper or at petrol prices without federal intervention or federal subsidies. But you had all these companies in the United States, many of them owned by foreign companies, that were still making them with more labor because they were made by Americans, or they were Chinese that left, and now the banks are stuck with it. And they made an argument that we need to put more tariffs on these panels coming in because they couldn't compete with it. And so it wasn't even American interests at the end of the day that dictated that tariffs were going to go on solar. So we'll see what that happens, but as far as used panels, there's enough of them out in the market that you should hopefully still be able to get your hands on them. There's a company out there, I'm gonna tell you this, so I'm never gonna be able to sell you a panel too, but there's a company out there, Santan, S-A-N-T-A-N. They sell used panels by the pallet. The shipping prices have doubled because basically you're thinking a single panel is probably about a 60, 70 pound pane of glass that has to be shipped from Gilbert, Texas. So the prices used to be like 200 some odd per pallet. Now they're closer to 400, 500 bucks per pallet. My ability, what I do is I sell used panels because sometimes people only need 3 or 4. Or they don't believe me that they work, and then they buy a few, and then they come back and buy more, but they don't need 20 or 50. Okay, so there's that. That's my system. The basic components of a solar array, solar panels are DC electricity. So you have a panel that produces DC electricity. After the DC electricity on the panel is made, it goes in. You have how many of here have car chargers for their battery or any battery, right? Okay. If you've ever looked at a car charger, it goes through cycles. There's like float, there's bulk, there's equalization. But what it is, all that means is that they're adjusting the voltage to get the most juice they can in the battery, and that's not just a fixed voltage. Okay. Well, if you took that car charger and you were able to basically get power from the sun doesn't constantly put out the same amount of power. It's always in flux. It's always coming down. You got bird crap. You got clouds. You got snow. So it's always in this constant up and down movement. And what a charger controller does, and that's the part you hook between the solar panel and the battery, is it basically takes this unregulated amount of sun, for lack of better terms, coming in, and it pre-digests it, and so it can charge the battery. So if you think of a charger controller as nothing more than a fancy battery charger that is used for sun, you understand how charger controllers work. There's typically 2 types. I'm not going to go into it for this class, but after that, the charger controller, now you have this beautiful battery, you have your solar panel, you have your charger controller. Okay, you got the 3 components there. But you have to have some way to turn that power into AC electricity. And if you've ever bought an inverter for a car, it's pretty much the same thing. If you have a 12-volt system, which means you have a 12-volt battery, a 12-volt panel, you're going to use a 12-volt inverter, okay? So you have to have the battery, the charger controller, and now you have to have an inverter. Okay, so we got battery, charger controller, and inverter, and solar panel. So we got 4 parts, okay? Now here's the other thing. Let's say all of a sudden you don't get sun for a few days. Like, oh my gosh, that never happens in Iowa, right? You have to have a way to charge those batteries, okay? So you'll also have a generator input, okay? So those are the components of a solar system. For an off-grid type battery backup solar system, those are the components. Now, most of when someone's knocking on your door and trying to sell you a solar system, what they're doing is they're actually having you lock in the price of your electricity, and then you're paying for like a $20,000 or $60,000 system. Okay, remember, I'm off-grid at 16, okay? So what they're doing is they're saying, look, you're going to buy the system from us. We'll give you a 1% interest rate. At least this is what I'm familiar with. And then what will happen is you'll always rather than paying the power company, you'll pay us. And so you're actually just buying you're locking your price in for solar. But the problem is most of those systems do not have battery backup. Florida found that out the hard way when they had hurricanes go through. You could look on these, you could see the satellite pictures, and all these houses had solar panels on it, but not a single ounce of power in their home. Okay. Those solar panels typically use these little guys called microinverters. They directly turn DC electricity from the panel into AC electricity right at the panel. And then it goes into the box in the house. There's the pluses and downs, the goods and pluses. The plus side is that this is relatively light and small. If you were to hook up your cell phone, you can see how every single panel is producing its power, how it's aging. We'll talk about that here in a minute for solar panel. And it requires, the components are relatively light, and they're really not intrusive, and they're really easy to hook up. The downside is anybody ever worked on a roof? Does things stay nice and cool? No. So now you have this inverter that's being cooked on a roof. And one of the byproducts of solar panels for electricity production is heat, right? Okay, so this is what you'll see on a lot of the systems. Now they do make some microinverter systems that have batteries. I'm not going to say they don't, but they're not very common in the market. And if you were to ask one of these people knocking on your door, how much would you, they'd either say they don't supply that type of system, or they're going to give you a ridiculous large number because they don't want to deal with it either. Okay. So if you were to look at a solar system, like my solar system in my house, you have a box that has another box underneath, which is just a fancy rewiring box and distribution box where everything lines up. But the main box on top has two large inverters, and it also has the battery charger that can charge the batteries if I was using a generator built into it. Okay. That all in itself, don't get scared, I'm going to make it easier for you, just listen to me. That all in itself is about $7,000. Okay. Each charger controller, which is like, so this guy here is a big commercial charger controller. This is Midnight. All my stuff's Outback. It's just a different brand. This is a Midnight charger controller. This is a traditional home charger controller. This is kind of the size it is. These guys go from anywhere from $200 to $600. Okay. I have 3 of them. This type of charge controller here, I use this for my class to talk about the different type of charger controllers. These go from anywhere from $12 to $20 based upon what you need. This is what I use to charge electric fences. I use for lighting outside. I use to maintain a battery. This uses for car batteries. So the nice thing about this charger controller here, this is the one I used for the article I wrote for Backwoods Magazine, Backwoods Home Magazine, is that if you were to plug this in, it'll give you 12 volts out here and 5 volts USB on the outputs. And then you can charge like a 24-volt battery. So you actually don't have 3 different voltages, so it's really useful. But most of the small charger controllers are relatively inexpensive. You can get them off Amazon. And we'll talk about some of the projects that you would use this here on. But these are you could see there's a huge difference in size between the two. Because if you opened up this one, there's a lot of, if you know what coils and capacitors are, basically a lot of, looks like blocks of things are in there. This is, these are the 2 different types. Typically, they're referred to as an MPPT charge controller and a PWM. Really what that means is that if you were to take a 24-volt panel, so if you look at trucks, they deal with nominal, when you say that's a half ton and that's a quarter ton, really it's just a classification, right? We're tracking. They do the same thing with panels. That's 24-volt nominal panel. That's a 72-volt nominal panel. That's a 12-volt nominal panel. This guy over here is a 12-volt nominal panel. If you were to have a battery bank, if you were to say, hey, I have a bunch of 12 volts, but I want to run a 48-volt battery bank, and you were to run them through a PWM charge controller, the way the system works, and the PWM being the smaller one, the way the system works is it'll drop the voltage of the panel to meet the battery. Okay. What that means, now this is the only math you have to know in my class, is voltage times current equals wattage. Okay, V times I equals W. I is going to throw everyone off, but that's how they do current and electricity. So V times I equals W. Well, if you lose 50% of your V, your output's going to be 50% low than what it should be, right? This charger controller doesn't have a way to fix that. The PWM charger controllers, on the other hand, they do the same thing. But what they'll actually do is, if you drop your V down 50%, they'll bump the I up 50%. So your W doesn't change. They have the ability to match the battery to the panel. Now, anyone who's paid attention to batteries, if you go if you look at batteries, they're never what they say. They always kind of, if you put them on the counter, they sit there a while, they lose voltage, they self-discharge. So ideally, if you were to use a cheap charger controller, make sure that your voltage of your panel matches the voltage of your battery bank. Okay? If you were to say, hey, you know, I want to use these smaller panels, I want to do a higher battery bank, I know I can wire them up a certain way, but they're not going to match, then spend the time to get a charger controller that's an MPPT charger controller. This is what a lot throwing at you for just an intro class, but the reason I bring this up is if you were to look at the insides of a PWM charge controller, it's just a circuit board. There's no capacitors, there's no coils. If you were to open up this guy, it is chock full of capacitors and coils. Okay? That's how you tell, because if you go on Amazon and you type in solar charge controller and you say, hey, there's an MPPT one, and you look at it and it doesn't have those pieces, then they're not selling you the right thing. They know there's a value to MPPT, and so they'll try to sell these as PWMs. They both do the same thing. And really what I'm telling you when I say PWM and MPPT, it's really the technology of how they do it, and it's just a nomenclature they use. So there's my charger control spill. We had the battery spill talking about lithium. We're going to talk about solar panels here. So I'll tell you how solar panels age, because this is the one thing you're going to probably want to know. Basically there are solar panels in outer space on satellites that are older than I am that are working fine. The way solar panels age is typically, and based upon the manufacturer, within the first 2 to 3 years, they'll lose anywhere from 2 to 5% of their output. After that break-in portion, it's 0.00 something percent for the remaining of their life. As a matter of fact, most solar panel companies will say this panel will produce 90% plus or minus for 25 years. So you'll have 90% guaranteed power production. That's normal. And the reason why panels age is if you ever seen a pool table that's been used a lot, shot a lot, you'll see there's rungs cut into the felt, right, of the pool table. And if you were to shoot a cue ball from one side to the other, it would deflect it from where you want it to go just a little bit. And when the electrons move across the silicone, it does the same thing. The silicon, it does the same thing. But after that initial break-in, that's it. Okay? That's how panels age. So a lot of times, if you're really concerned about, I'm using an old panel, I had one guy kind of being anal about it. I'm like, well, you buy one more panel, and it will outlive your and my existence and cover the whole, because we're talking 2 to 5% at that point. Now, here's a cool thing that a lot of people do not know about solar. This sounds like one of the clickbait rings, right? You always see. Is solar panels, when they are cold, they overproduce their rated wattage by a lot. But the other side is true as well. As they get hot, their wattage drops, their rating drops. So here in the Midwest, we have a lot of days like today. You look outside, it looks great. We're going to go camping, right? You walk out and you're like, this is insane, right? So I can tell you the first solar array that we had was a 2.8 array with used old batteries. With the sun reflect off the snow, with the temperatures of how cold it was being, we were like 3.8 watt. This is kilowatts, I apologize, 3.8 kilowatts. So your panel will overproduce when it's cold. And the same system that I have in Iowa, if they had the same system in Arizona and Hawaii, I'm beating them because it's also a lot hotter there during the summer times as well. As the panel heats up, it becomes less efficient. And as we know, anything you stick on a roof is going to become hot. And then we also talked about the fact that energy production is a byproduct of solar panels is heat. So how do we deal with this constant moving target of the fact that the panel isn't ever what it's supposed to be rated at? Okay, well, if you look on the back of the panel, it does what they call standard test condition. And this really, it's a way to kind of rate one panel against another, but it's almost useless to you. What it says is that at 77 degrees, right, never gets warmer than 77 degrees on a roof, but at 77 degrees with so many lumens per square meter, this is what the panel will put out, okay? And that's how they rate it. Here's the tool I'm going to give you. And I'm going to go through it since I can't go through the slides, which is probably pretty good because the slides are actually probably older. If you get on your phone and you type into Google, because I'm sure they've changed the website nomenclature. I'm not a Fed, this is a .gov, okay? Okay, good, great, we understand that. I can't be a troll and I guess I could be a troll and a Fed at the same time. So if you type in PV, Papa Victor, watts, W-A-T-T, yep, W-A-T-T-S. And you hit PV watts. Yeah, you can go ahead and hit calculator, see if that pulls it up. That's what I punch. And then open the website PV watts calculator. It's National Renewable Energy Laboratories is what you're actually accessing. Hopefully Doge doesn't knock this one out, but I'd be willing to tolerate it. So as everyone's loading. Yep, that's exactly it. It kind of has an orange in that up in the box that has like your zip code. You can put your zip code. Everyone's kind of good on this. So, yep, that's fine. Let me know. Yep, that's it. Just hold tight. Don't jump it. There's a part that you can't miss that's just kind of tricky. Okay. We good? If you're still loading, I'm fine. Let me know. Just let me know. Okay. So it says enter your home or address business. Now, if you want to do that, you can. It's going to give a satellite picture where you live. But I just say just put your zip code in there. So in my case, it's going to be 51557. No, you're not freaking out. You don't know where that is probably. 51557. So just put your zip code in there. It doesn't need to match mine. You're going to get a screen that says solar resource data. And then you'll get a map below it. And it should also, yes, in the solar resource data, there's going to be a box that's going to give you a longitude and latitude. It's going to say lat and longitude. Okay, what you want to do is you want to take your latitude. So in my case, it's 41.7. There's a smoke shop in Omaha called 42 degrees, and people don't understand that's the latitude of Omaha. But you want to take 41.7. So what we're doing is we want that number because one of the questions they ask on this website is what tilt angle do you want your panels at? If you had to set your panels for one tilt angle that catches the best of everything, it's going to be your latitude. That's your tilt angle. So your panels ideally would be, for this exercise, would be whatever your tilt angle is. So remember that number, kind of make it down. It should be 40 something, I'm assuming. We're not that far off. Okay? The reason why this is so important is because if you use the default latitude tilt angle they give you, your numbers are going to look horrible. They're not going to work because they're not for where we live, okay? Because they're going to give you a default angle. The nice thing about this is that if you want to know what your array, because we're going to simulate building an array, okay? If you want to know what your array is would put out for winter, you would use minus 15 degrees to that 40 number, and if you want to know what it is for summer, you would use positive 15 degrees. Now, if you're a homesteader and you're living off grid, you would actually set your panels to a winter tilt. And you're like, well, why would you do that? Because if your array is big enough to cover your power needs in the winter, then it's definitely big enough to cover it in the summer with a winter tilt involved.
What is that, array?
Array, sorry, your bulk of panels. So all bunch of panels together, they call it a solar array. Oh. I apologize. Thanks for pulling that out for me. Sorry?
Is winter plus or minus?
I believe winter is plus. It's kind of backwards. It's a little different. But here's the thing. It doesn't really matter because what it's going to do is it's going to give you a yearly printout of what that array that we're going to build here in a minute does. And if you see, well, this thing does a lot more in the summer, then you know you've gone that direction. So my recommendation is that just run with your latitude right now. Because right now we're just doing a simulation. What does a 100-watt panel put out? A DC panel, this website will tell you how much it puts out in AC. And it will tell you from every month to month to hour to minute. So if my wife asks me, John, in 2028 at 3 o'clock in December, I'm going to put on the crock pot, what time should I put it? I could give her that answer in just a minute. That's how strong this website is because it pulls all the weather data from your zip code you give it. All the weather stations. And then it comes out with a simulation of what it will probably be. Okay. So if you go ahead and you put in your, you see that number, so just make a mental note of that number. It should be 40-something. Let me get back into my phone. It kicked me out. There's, on the side of the website, there's an orange triangle. It's going to be on the right side. It's going to look like this. It just means to move on to the next slide. Does everybody see it? You guys back here? I don't have a video. Okay, it's just going to look like this on the side. We're good? Go ahead and click on that. It's going to take you to the next screen. And we'll use that. It says Go to System Info. Okay, So now we got a bunch of interesting specs and numbers. This website's really cool because in all the blocks that you're not sure what goes in there, there's an I. You can click on the information. Okay, we do know, if you look at the default, it says 4 standard fixed, 14.08, 20, 180. Yours should say the same thing. Your DC system size, this is default to 4. But if you look at it, it's 4 kilowatts. So if you have a 4 kilowatt, 4,000 watt system, it's already set up for that, okay? If you're like, well, I just want to know what a 100 watt panel would be, you'd be 0.1, right? It'd be 100. If you put 100 in there, that's a 100 watt kilowatt system. You understand? Everyone tracking with that? Okay. We're going to pretend we're doing my system. So we're going to put like 11.7 in. Okay, so we're going to delete that 4 and put 11.7. Now, the next question is module type. We'll leave as standard. Array type, we'll leave it as fixed, open. It's just saying does it tilt or not. System losses, it gives a default of 14.08. System losses is going to be bird crap, snow, clouds, the power you lose when you convert DC to AC, because there's a loss during that conversion. That 14.08 is fixed. You can adjust it later, but for this exercise, we're going to leave it alone. But look at your tilt degree angle. It says 20. That's horrible for what we're doing. So put in your latitude that I told you needed right down. Mine was 1.7, whatever you guys had. So I'm going to run with mine, of course. The next number is azimuth. Just leave it alone. Now, here's the interesting thing. Before we move on to the next page, let me see if this doesn't have it yet. Nope, there's advanced parameters. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next page. Now, if you did put your address in there, you could put your map and put your house and where everything is located at. But go ahead and hit the next page. Now it's giving you a breakdown of how much electricity, if you go to the far right, that system will put out every month in AC electric. So in my system, it will put out 1.093, because your guys are using different, I understand you're using different tilt angles, but that's going to be for for January. But my system basically puts out anywhere between 15 to 17 kilowatt hours per year. But here's the even more funner is not a word I understand, my wife gives me, but here's even the more fun part, is you can go in there and you can download the results of monthly and hourly, and it'll give you a spreadsheet. So you can say, look, we consume X amount. What size array do I need? I could say, well, let's run some simulations. How much electricity do you want to power? Do you want all of it to be supplemented? Do you want part of it to be supplemented? Do you want extra if your power company gives you a kickback for producing electricity? And then there's also an option that, and yeah, I can't find it. It's probably in advance because they've changed things up. But there's also an option to put your amount of how much you pay for electricity per kilowatt hour in there. So not only will it translate how much AC electricity, which is the column all the way over to the right, but it'll also translate it into money, how much dollars your solar system is putting out that month. Okay? This is an awesome tool. What else you can do with this tool is you're like, hey John, I'm putting on my roof, it's this tilt angle, boom, you can put the tilt angle on there for your roof. Okay? And if you click on the eye, it tells you what your drop is to figure out tilt angle, if you know what your drop is. Okay? Because a lot of people know the drop of the roof, not the tilt angle. If you're like, well, I never want to clean solar panels off, I want them out of my house, what would be, it'd be, okay, put it at 90 degrees and find out what your power is. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to buy an extra panel because now I have to offset what I lose because it's vertical. Or you're like, hey, I want it for my RV. Now it's just flat. Okay, put that in there and see what it looks like. And they're like, hey, I found out that I can put them flat, but when I park my RV, if I just tow them out a little bit this direction, it goes up this much amount. Okay? So this tool is great to play with because it allows you to play with artificial systems. Like it does it at 4K at this, it does it at 11K at this, or 10K at this. So if you're like, hey, I just got on this website and they have a package and it's 12K worth of solar panels, you can run it through the simulator to actually see what it's supposed to produce in your location, your specific location. Because your numbers are going to be different than mine because of our latitude, just by a little bit. Okay? Everyone's tracking? Now, I was asked over here about winter and summer tilt. Here's the cool thing. You can go back and rerun it for winter tilt. It's going to give you all this information, and then rerun it for summer tilt, and then compare all three. Is it worth your time to change the tilt. In the class that I run, we go through that question and we say, okay, here's summer tilt, here's winter tilt, here's all the numbers. If I was living grid tied, it almost produces a free month of electricity if I was living grid tied, to take the time to tilt them. The thing is that whenever you have tiltable panels, if you looked at the pictures at my booth, our top panel is about 12 feet up in the air. So it's like a wind cell, okay? If you were to build a tiltable system, you're building in a deficiency in the structure because it has to be able to tilt, which when it's a wind load makes it even more difficult because now rather than it being a fixed array, it wants to naturally tilt because it's designed that way. If you're off grid, you just do a fixed winter array. You just lock it in fixed. So it's going to be your latitude plus 15 degrees, I believe. And you just lock it in at that tilt angle. The nice thing about that tilt angle is that the winter array, because the sun is lower in the sky, rather than your panels look like this, they look more like this. So they're more likely to shed snow a lot quicker. Plus, this is awesome for a hailstorm. Okay? If you look at Russian tank armor, they all look like they're amphibious tanks because all the armor's tilted. It has slopes on it. It's harder for a round to penetrate sloped armor. It works the same way with solar panels. Okay, so you're benefiting yourself for multiple reasons. In addition, solar panels are rated, and I gotta look, I think they're like 1 inch to 3 inches. I gotta pull up my slides, but at 52.5 miles per hour for hail. I have never lost a panel to solar panels to hail ever, period. Now I've seen pictures, but I personally never have, knock on wood. And I've been doing solar for over 10 years. Okay, I've been it's like closer to 50. I remember my oldest kid. Then you do everything off your oldest kid. We're like, oh, okay. Closer to 15 years, okay? So, yeah, but I have lost panels. One, if you install your panel on your house and you just tilt it up against your house and you have a gravel driveway and the wind does this, you've lost your panel because it just punches through it. If you have your house, once again, you think I would have learned my lesson, laying up against your house like this, and we use it for ventilation for our root cellar, and this is a sheet of glass, and you have dogs, and it's 22 below zero outside, the dog decides he's going to pee on anything that isn't ground, you're going to lose your solar panel, okay, because it's going to crack. So I had a little kid in here, I'm like, you learned about how to lose solar panels, don't have dogs pee on it, right? And then I lost another one to the same thing, falling over. So the 3 panels I've lost is all because I had them not mounted, tilted on the house. Now, with panels being cracked, my experience is they'll still put out 2/3 of their electricity. I had somebody ask me, well, are you going to be teaching about repairing panels? Yeah, you can buy encapsulation and it works pretty good. But you can buy solar panels at under $70, for used panels, and they even have new ones that are $100 based upon the wattage. Encapsulation's close to $70 just for the encapsulation. And the only thing you're stopping is water to get into the cells, but you're only going to put out 2/3 of the solar panel. With that being the case, the one that the dog pees on, we still use for ventilation for our root cellar. Okay. But anyways, there's the story on that. Okay, so we talked about batteries, talked about charge controllers, talked about solar panels. Oh yeah, let's talk about generation real quick. So we use a generator about, 4, maybe 5 times a year. And what that sounds like is we have not had any useful sun for 3 days. We had a couple of those days. Anybody kind of really notices that there's is that orb coming back out? We had a lot of those days where day after day after day after day. But here's the nice thing, whatever sun we did get, guess what temperature the panels were? Really cold, yeah. And so we did get what we could get. But when the wife says, John, we have 4 daughters, you have uniforms, this is the 3rd day of no sun, we need to wash laundry, we turn the generator on, right? At that point, we're also pumping water for our cistern, thank you, and charging batteries, exactly, and running. So we all get excited when that sun comes out. It's like, okay, here's all the lists we have to do, and girls like, there's no excuse to not know when to put the chickens away because the orb's in the sky that tell you. Like it's new to them that there's a sun, right? And so I always treat it like that. Like there's this bob in the sky that's yellow, And they've heard this for like 18 years. It's great. The older they get and the more I tell it, the worse it gets. It's great. It just rubs them the wrong way. My dad's a troll. Okay, so, but anyways, yeah, here's one of the cool things that we're doing. So who was the other gentleman that has a Hecco stove in here? Yeah, we should like start a commune of just Hecco stoves, right? Hecco stoves is an Amish cook stove. The one that I have, and I believe the same one he has, they're originally rated for coal, but you can use them for wood, and then there's a smaller one that also do wood. The reason I bring that up is that's primarily how we heat our house right now. And to learn how to cook on a wood stove is a skill set that's awesome. You just end up owning a lot of pots and stuff that are ceramic. You know, they have the ceramic coating on them. And when my kids, when we homeschooled them, they would wake up at 9, because kids actually need sleep, believe that or not. And they wake up at night, they can think right, and at least you have a reason to be mean to them because they're supposed to be awake. And they'd go out and they would walk the lines for the pig lines, take a hammer with them, smash the water in the pig lines, probably tell me something died or something's being born. And then they would take off their Carhartts, off their pajamas, get their hot cocoa off the wood stove and do their homeschool all by themselves. And then 4 hours later, the day belonged to them. And if I came home from work and they were still working on homework, I knew we had a hard day. Somebody wasn't paying attention, right? But we have, back to what I was saying, is we have this wood stove heating our house. This year, early in the year, my wife made it a priority for me to get the mini split up and running. So a mini split, most of you guys, some of you guys are familiar with, if you've seen the commercials on Facebook for the Mr. Cool DIY, is probably one of the most common ones you see on Facebook. The ads are pretty funny. Basically, you have the compressor and everything that sits outside, and you have a vent that sits inside. So even if you've probably seen that, you kind of know what it's going. But the mini split, we used a hot point. You can write that down if you want to, and I'll tell you why you want to write that down here in a minute. That's the name of the company. I'm sure they make it for everybody. Is that on the side of the box that sits outside the compressor, you have what they call MC4 connectors. Those are the connectors that solar panels use. Do not cut them off. These are made to be weather resistant. Do not cut them off. Just go ahead and buy the other side with wires coming off them. Don't cut them off. Don't cut them off, okay? But they plug into the mini split, and what happens is that when you have, on the inside, you have a little gauge that shows how much power is coming from the solar panels and how much power is coming from the 220. So when it's the hottest outside, you probably have sun. Well, for us, the mini split also, because it's a heat pump, you can also heat with it. So during the day, like days like this, we don't burn wood during the daytime, which allows you to have a lot smaller wood pile and a lot less effort, okay? You can also do it for dehumidifying, et cetera. But here's the cool thing about the mini split. You're like, well, why are you bringing this up? It's nice that you have one. It doesn't go back into the grid. And so for all intents and purposes, the utility company in your area should see that set up as an appliance and leave you the hell alone, because you're not putting it back on the grid. It's not designed to go back on the grid. There's no way to put it back on the grid. And it will take care of one of the largest loads in your house, which is the heating and cooling of your home, right? Okay, so we talked about panels, batteries. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to point out, we were talking about, I said I was going to scare you because of the cost and stuff like that. Okay, this box, now this one is a 220 box. This actually goes in our greenhouse in the snow because we have 110 and 220. And yes, you can buy a box that has both legs. This box has the inverter, has the battery charger to hook to a generator, has charger controllers built into it, and cost me $269. Okay. The only downside, and you should know as homesteaders, it's not componentized. You can't just change out components like a separate charger controller or a separate inverter. Okay. So if you're kind of a fan of 2 is 1 and 1 is none, they're cheap enough to buy a second one. Now, granted, this one's built for 220. The 220 ones are cheaper because most of them, that's what they use overseas. But even the really nice ones, if you want to write down, Signature Solar sells the EG4, EG3s. They sell one that's made by veterans that are EMP rated if you're worried about such things. Those would be Solar Arc, S-O-L-A-R-K, Solar Arc. And all you got to do is on the bottom of it is you plug in the solar panels, the battery, if you're tied to grid, your line for the grid, and your generator, and that's it. You just plug it in. There's not a huge box to wire all this crap because everything sits in there. And that plug-in is UL registered. So chances are you could probably get away without that portion of it without a certified electrician. Now they have to come and do their inspection and stuff, and that's it. It used to be you had all this distribution, like my wall looks like spaghetti, but I leave it that way because I come from a nuclear industry. Anybody here come from a submarine industry? Yeah, we don't hide components, and they don't do that in nuclear either. Everything you can see is out in the open. So for I'd say, well, I'm really lazy, and well, maybe I'm just want to show the students, maybe I'm just lazy, I don't know. But I leave everything else so everybody can see it. So if you were to do a cabin, and you were to say, hey, I just have this cabin I want to do, and you bought an off-grid, you bought one of those all-in-ones, is the term they use when they talk about them. You can buy an all-in-one for less than $1,000. I think for $700, if you look up Signature Solar on your phone, and you go to products, and you type inverter, and they'll say on-grid or off-grid, you can find them for around $600, $700. That will give you up to 3,000 watts of electricity, and have everything built in for under $800, around $700, $600, right? I'll see what tariffs do with that. But so what cost me $7,000, I could probably get away with $1,000, or even maybe $1,500. Solar Arc's a little more expensive. And then my lithium battery would be knock another $1,000 to $2,000 off that. And then I paid a full price because I was kind of a fanboy for a certain brand that I had in my last house, so I was willing to pay extra money for them. So that's how you make it cheaper. And when you do your research, you'll find out that's the case. One of the things, now we got some of these other tools in your house. Somebody asked me about wind turbines, right? We live everywhere in Iowa. The joke in Iowa, the reason we're so windy is because Nebraska sucks so bad. Because I live on that side. I've heard the joke so many different ways, but so this is if you were to get on, this company belongs to I've been with this company long enough, at least following them, that they've gone through 3 different owners. Originally, there's southeast or southwestern turbines, and now they belong to a company called Primus, and then just recently this year, they went to a third company. I can't think of the name, but if you were to search Primus wind turbines, they still carry their name. The reason that this is only an 800-watt turbine, but these are the ones you see on all the yachts, and you see on all the boats. These are the ones you see on all the oil derelict communication centers. The reason I like these so much is for a couple reasons. All their training videos for maintenance, at least when Primus owned it, were all done by customers. Anybody know any electrical, mechanical things where the company's trying to actually get your hands in their equipment? They do it. This is a 48-volt unit, if I wanted to put a 24-volt starter and I called them, they would send me it and send me the schematics on how to do it. And then chances are they'd send me a link to a video by a customer who did do it. Okay. They also have YouTube videos, 3-hour seminars of how to integrate solar into your system. The nice thing about these is there's literally no components between this and the battery. That's it. There's no bleed loads. What happens when it meets its requirement, it just stops working. It has mechanical break. So in my system, if you look at how charger controllers, which do the job of charging the battery, what they do is they also look at the voltage of the battery. And as the sun goes down, the charger controller has this battery and is trying to maintain it at a load because the batteries are always slowly self-discharge. It's called the float voltage. It's trying to float the battery to keep it where it needs to be. As the sun goes down, and the float voltage slowly starts to drop. You would basically adjust these that say kick in when the float voltage drops. Because yearly what happens is as you lose solar power throughout the year, the wind picks up at the same time. The two curves cross over each other like that, right? And when you go through the seminar, if you want to know more about it, there's 3-hour seminars. They're very good. They're very, very good. And the warranties on these are like, I think 3 to 5 years, which is unheard of on a micro turbine. Plus they sell parts to maintain them. Now here's the other deal. You're like, well, yeah, John, but I want like a 2 or 6K, not an 800-watt turbine. Okay, great. Convince your insurance that you're going to put a couple 100-pound transmission, at least if you do it right, 60 foot higher than anything else around you. Okay, because to get clean air, you need 60 foot. Otherwise, you get turbulence. Now, for these little guys, they're like 20-watt tilt up is the most highest you're going to get. And if you call them and say, well, can't you offer me a bigger tilt up, they'll look at you and say, it's 800 watts. And why do you want to spend the money? Now, for the price that these cost new, and I recommend not buying them new, they're made in Colorado, you can get them on eBay for almost half the price. Because new, they're slightly over $1,000. And you can get them off Northern Tool, very common, and the tower and everything else. But you can find them for less than that off eBay. Just notice they're set up per wattage of the battery. And the newer units have boards that are made made for, voltage of the battery. The newer units have boards that are made for lithium charging. So if you buy an old unit and you have lithium batteries, pay attention, but you can order that board separately. Okay, these have 20-foot tilt-down towers. They're really easy to do. There's videos. If you type in Primus Window, people have them. You can buy them that are quieter or they're louder, etc. Okay, so that's going to be my wind spiel. So let me kind of talk about some of the projects we have on our homestead that even if, yes ma'am?
What's the brand name of that?
If you type in Primus Wind, I don't know who owns them now, but they still keep their moniker because that's what everybody knows them by. Okay? Any questions, more questions about wind? Yes?
Not wind, but you mentioned the mini split.
Yes.
How big of a solar panel do you need to run that?
Good question. So it depends what wattage you go with. My recommendation and their recommendation is try to get something 300 watts or higher, because if you go with smaller panels, you require more panels. Okay? And so, but the thing is that long as you stay underneath their voltage rating, you can put as many on as you want, which just means you're going to be exposed. You're going to be able to go a little longer, right? So solar panels are a lot like batteries. I'm not going to get too far like this in class. If you hook them up in series, so you think one ends and one begins, and one ends and one begins, and one ends and one begins, like a baseball series, solar panels, their voltage goes up, just like batteries do. If you hook all the positives together, so you think of the monkey bars, so all the positives are on one side and all the negatives are on the other side, the current goes up. So if you have a load or you have a charger controller that says, well, it has to be this voltage, that means you can keep adding to a point. But if you wire them the wrong direction, you're going to blow through the voltage. Charger controllers are wattage rated and voltage sensitive. So when you're like, okay, let's do the math here real quick. I have a 100-watt panel and I have a 12-volt battery. What size charger controller do I need? Well, you just do the math. We talked about V times I equals W, right? You need to take the 100-watt panel and divide it by 12. That tells you what size charger controller you need. Okay? And it'll say right on the charger controller what it can stand. There will be a sticker on it that says I can stand this much amperage and this much voltage. So just as long as you don't blow through one of those two parameters. And based upon how you wire the panel, you can mess around in this window. Okay? The problem is that if you have, say, hey, I'm in an RV, we have a 12-volt system, and I want to hook up a 315-watt panel. I want two of them, so I want 630 watts. Divide 630 watts by 12. It's a big number. Okay? You are better off working a system that allows you to have a 24-volt panel and less amperage. If you have to move a lot of voltage, it's not a big deal. The components don't get bigger. If you have to move a lot of current, the wires, the heat sinks, everything gets bigger. Everything gets bigger. So there's something that solar does not do very well is that people say, well, what about a whole house system, right? I want a whole house AC. I want it to run my geothermal. I want it to do all this stuff. With lithium, they're getting to the point where you can have high voltage battery systems for solar. That's not something I play in. I don't pay attention to it, and a lot of the guys who do that don't pay attention to what I do. It's just, for some reason, that seems to be the case. But it allows them to run a lot of that centralized stuff. You know, my battery in my house is 48 volts. So when somebody says, hey, I want to run this aquarium heater that's 1,000 watts, well, I have to do the math. And I'm like, okay, we have a house battery that has 835 watts, but half of that I can't use. So we have a house battery that has 415 or 17 watts or whatever, or amps. And you're going to suck down how much current per hour? Yeah, that doesn't work. Matter of fact, I used to be a huge aquarium guy. All my fish died of old age, not sickness. And I had to give up being an aquarium guy with all these tanks. That was one of the main things. Because going into a sunroom that's heated with wood doesn't work out very well. Okay. So we talked about the all-in-ones, how that price has dropped. One of the things that people ask a lot is about refrigeration, right? Especially if you do a lot of meat. How does that work for solar? You can find these little guys and tutorials about them. We all know that chest freezers are more efficient, right? Because the cold doesn't fall out of them. They're insulated typically better. This is the manufacturer's WILLHI. What these do is you drop your temperature gauge into the chest freezer. You plug the chest freezer in here. You plug this into the wall. You can now control the temperature of that chest freezer, but you can turn it on and off. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to use a freezer as a refrigerator. So now you can, rather than trying to, but the truth is, as nice as this is, once refrigerators and freezers are already at their temperature, they use very minimal amount of electricity. It's keeping them at their temperature, that's the trick. My house, if all that stuff I told you that's in it, idles between, what, 200 to 300, Chris? 200 to 300 watts. If I go downstairs and look, and if I see the numbers higher on that, it's typically because we might be cycling the refrigerator, or we're using an IR heater for the chickens. Okay, but that's. See what else? So let me show you this real quick. This is a heating element out of a hot water tank. Everyone kind of recognizes this. If you hook this to a solar panel, this will heat up. It doesn't care if it's AC, DC. Now, granted, you can buy certain ones that are matched better to the panel than other ones, but this right here allows me to heat water out in the forest with just a solar panel hooked to the ends. Okay, take that system and hook it to a PEX system in the house that is for floor radiant heating, and you understand how we're heating the floor in the house. The same type of system, because when solar panels came out, they were too expensive to use for what's called resistive loads. But if you have an IBC tote and you do it properly, you can have water in your IBC tote all winter long that stays liquid to water your pigs or cows or whatever you have if you hook solar panels to it. Okay, so this is kind of, in a short way, this is kind of the system. We have a 600-gallon holding tank because that's what's required if the sun goes down to still have enough heat, and that's a whole different class. But this is what we will be using to heat the floor in our house. And plus, we have a dump load for the HECO. The guy who has HECO knows what I'm talking about. Basically, it's basically a tube that goes through there that you heat up with. Okay, see what other toys we have here. So we were talking about charge controllers. This is slightly bigger. If you open this up, there's coils in it. But if you look at it, it says right on the side, this one's nice. It tells you what wattage and you can run it at and what voltage your array needs to be at. But you actually can do the math and figure that out for yourself. When we lived in a travel trailer, 32-foot travel trailer with 6 kids, 3 dogs, 2 cats. 4 kids, thank you. Yeah, we're working on that. Sorry. Apologize, thanks. I was trying to figure out how many animals we had at the time. This is what ran our solar system for our and we just use floor scrubber batteries at the time. And that system is on our Facebook page. So this is a nice little tool. This has the charger controller already on the back. It's a PWM charger controller, and then it just has the panels. This is about 100 watts. 100 watts will definitely run an electric fence. If you have pigs and you're trying to fence train them, because we had pigs where all we had was electric. We had 2 lines of electric, no higher than my knee. So you could walk over it and scratch the board and walk back if he doesn't want to be scratched, right? All we did was we had a 100-watt panel, that guy there, and then we had an inverter. Yeah, you can actually buy one for $14 off out of Walmart. This is for fence training. That ran a shock box that was a constant on shock box, which means no pulsation. It just stays on. And we'd run it on the bottom line, and then we put food on there. And when the piglets would come to see the food, they'd get zapped. Okay, because a pig a lot of times will hear. They're smart enough. And a lot of times they'll get far enough in there that if there's shocks their bum and they go forward, right? But at a constant on, that's not going to happen. Matter of fact, if a possum gets stuck underneath there, we had one that he locked up and it cut his tail right off and he died right there on the spot. Okay, you don't want a constant on if you have a Yorkie or something small like that. Okay, a matter of fact, you shouldn't have a Yorkie out in the country anyways because they just become fodder for other animals. Okay, sorry, small dog fans. The guy who has like 5 cats that doesn't want 5 cats. And so, but yeah, that's so. And then of course, once they get used to it, then we put it back on, back to a regular shock box. So, but all the components the components, we've already talked about them, but you got a solar panel, you got a charger controller, one of the cheapy ones, and you got a battery and a shock box. Now, if you have a pulsator, you don't need an inverter, it works right off DC, right? And so, in building that system, you could use like one of the small batteries for a lawnmower. That's about all you need. And it's cheaper than what you're going to build at Baumgart's or what you're going to buy at Baumgart's. Let's see what other components we have up here real quick that we have talked about. I think we're pretty good. I think it's probably a good time to just do Q. Oh, so sizing your house. One of the cool features, this isn't it, but this is a close facsimile. There's a thing called a kilowatt meter. If you take a kilowatt meter and you plug it into your house on like a power strip, and you can turn it on, and it'll tell you how much electricity you're using and store it. So one of the things we did in our house before we left, and I didn't know that the fish tanks were such a downer, is that we kilowatt metered everything. And we'd come back like in 2 or 3 weeks and look at it and get the averages and the usage. Okay, I definitely recommend using a kilowatt meter, and the nice thing about them is that you can also use them to see where loads are in your house that are running away from you. Like we don't have dot matrix printers anymore, but if you had a dot matrix printer staying on in the 90s, you could use a lot of money per every month just sitting there and humming. Something else, some of you guys have these already. This is, I call them power packs. This will do 3 loads of front laundry in my house, okay? For some reason, if we lost power. This we also use to run the TV. If you're a beekeeper, this will run an oxalic acid pump sprayer. So they're nice to have. We use the hell out of this one. We use to have a portable light set, which works great. And this thing is probably 4 or 5 years old, we'd probably say. You agree? Okay, yeah. At the time, this one I think cost me $227. Okay. So all it is, if you think about it, well, what the heck is it? It's a lithium battery with an inverter and a charger. This one and almost every single one of them come with a way to add solar panels to it, a way to charge it, maybe from a signal lighter and charge it from the wall. So you have a lot of ways of charging it. EcoFlow, Blue Eddy are just big versions of this that have built-in charger controllers. So you can add arrays to them. And the new way a lot of people are going is those systems, they have them like Legos where you can smack in more capacity. So you can just keep adding to them. But they have the charger controllers built in. You just have to be careful with the specs like we've already talked about. Okay, any questions? This is about, we can all run through real quick. Any questions? We can fill the questions for the rest of it. Yes, sir.
On the solar panels, what's the used panels? Where are they coming from, or what?
Yes, good question, because I get this question as I sell solar panels. So a lot of times they're coming from solar farms that have been decommissioned, or they have a solar farm that one got hit by hail and they just replace all of them. So a lot of them are coming from places like that. So it takes a little bit of a while for some of the bigger ones. Now, it used to be that I could easily and only got panels that are like 215 through 30. Now almost all my panels are 300 watts or higher because that has finally cycled through the system, that lag time. There was somebody, yeah.
So when we had looked into getting solar a couple of years ago, and when people came, I think we had a company come that like went out of business now, but one of the things that we kept hearing over and over again was like the reason why they needed to go through like a company as opposed to people who tried to do it themselves was that the process to like get permits to do it and to work with the like MediaCom or whatever is really hard for them to allow you to do this. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so remember the all-in-one I was telling you about that you just hook through the bottom? You just see what county you're in and say, can I get an inspector to come out here from the county and say this is fine? Now someone say, yeah, even on top of that, you have to have a certified electrician. Okay, I'm going to install everything. The certified electrician can show up and do this. Put everything in. Okay, he can wire it in.
You had to like try to apply for all these different
It depends where you live. It depends. I had a friend that lives in a gated community around a lake, to kind of give you an idea what type of gated community this is. He asked for solar, and he had to go through the HOA, and they had no idea. They're like, well, we need permits, we need diagrams, we need writing. He went through all this. And so he showed him their equipment, and the guy was like, well, I know that goes to something else. And he's like, well, which one should I do? And he goes, I don't know. And I said, well, the right answer was show him 4 or 5, and then whatever one he's unfamiliar with, use that one. Just because you know something doesn't mean it does not going to work. So a lot of it is local, but as far as like that mini split issue, it should almost be a non-starter because it's not going back into the grid. All their concerns, but the truth of the matter is once they sign off on it, let's say for some stupid reason if they lose power and there's a guy out there on the line, they're going to go after the UL and NEC of the company of that company because their pockets are deeper than yours. When we were grid tied in the first house, they made us carry $1 million rider policy because we were hooked to the grid. Because their fear was, well, if this happens, then this what happens. Well, that's never happened in history. So we had me, my insurance guy, the REC, and the people who actually produce electricity all in the same room in my barn, and we were talking about this. And I said, really, this is a barrier to entry. And they're like, yeah, no, it's for safety. And I looked at my insurance guy, and he's like, no, they signed off on it. I never see a situation we're ever going to pay out for the policy if something happens. I don't see it at all. And I said, okay, let's just get down to see how stupid this is. Mr. Insurance Guy, for me, if you were to sell me alien abduction insurance, statistically, that would be more useful than this. And he's like, yes. Okay. just so everyone here knows it's dumb. Yes.
Can you, I got a Mr. Cool.
Uh-huh.
DIY. Will that run?
No,
You cannot do that on
no, there's no MC4 connectors for DC inputs on the side. So your best bet at that point is just powering your house and then having it use the power for powering your house.
I never got that.
Yeah.
Have you looked into bifacial?
Oh, thanks for bringing that up. So there's a couple different types of solar panels. There's these ones called bifacial, which basically they're translucent, and they have a secondary panel behind it. So it allows you to almost have two panels in the same footprint. The nice thing about bifacial, too, is that if you have a pergola or pagoda or any of those words I can't pronounce properly, and you want some way to block sun, but still get some dappled sunlight, they work great. And they're not new technology. They've been around forever. The other type of solar panel, this is what's considered a mono, which means one, because they actually just pour the ingot where they cut the sheets and put them in. Okay. This one's poly, where you can see the little squares, where they actually have the silicone. They actually apologize. These are the sheets. These are mono, and you can tell mono because they have the spaces, and this is poly because when they actually pour the ingot, which means most poly, if you look at them, they'll have snowflakes. You've probably seen solar panels that look like blue little snowflakes on them. It used to be that these were the king as far as energy production, but as you can see, their space is not being used. So now it's a wash. It used to be that mono were the best, poly were not all that great, but there's heating characteristics. You can see that the space is used more efficiently because I don't have all these little circle spots. So really, someone says, should I go mono or poly? I say, what's the cheapest? What works best for you? It really is not a non-starter. On that being the case, there's what they call all blacks, black frames, black backing, black cells. And a lot of places where there's HOAs, you have to have all blacks because they just blend in, right? So, but that's the only time I'd spend the extra money for something like that. Yes?
Is there a distance that you have to keep your solar array close to what you're trying to power?
Yeah, so we're talking about DC electricity here. There are things, and I talk about in a class called DC optimizers that kind of bump the voltage up, because if you ever can bump the voltage up, then you don't have to have so much current, right? But also if you wire them for a higher voltage, if your charger controller will take care of it, then I think I have double lot going through my house and through the floor. And there's calculators, which we will not cover in this class because of time, that you can figure out how much. Now here's the only warning I have. Don't use aluminum. And not that I have anything against aluminum, but the problem with aluminum is it likes to work its way out of connectors when it changes temperature. And so that's really just the only hassle. I recommend if you can spend the money for the copper, go ahead and do it. And so,
Can I ask one more question?
yes.
If you change it to AC closer to your solar array, is it easier to push AC further with less voltage?
So AC, yeah, that's the whole Tesla versus Westinghouse argument. I've never taken the time to see if microinverters where they happen right at the panel are actually better for distance. How far away would you say our array is from our house?
Maybe 75 feet.
70, yeah. And so yeah, I've never bothered with that. The nice thing about microinverters is that they have to see online AC power to function, hence why the power goes out. But I had a guy that I was selling panels to. He kind of jimmy-rigged it to feed itself, which you can do. I'm not recommending doing that. And he had like 4 or 5 panels just laying around his front yard, and he had an extension cord where he's feeding power back into the house. So he comes out with the wife beater, and he has them hanging off the basketball court and everything. And it was such a beautiful mess. I was impressed. And I said, look, I'm selling you this to you. I go, this is not code, and I'm not even a code fan, right? Sometimes we're protecting entry for labor. And I go, just so you know, and he goes, I know. And I said, okay, as long as you know, I'll sell you the panel. But I was just like, holy crap, he's really doing it. Like he has these all wired back, Well, the problem is that breaker boxes are not really designed for both directions as far as power coming in and power coming out. And so you could have more power on that line than you're supposed to, and you're not going to get any safety features with your breaker box. And so, but I've seen it done. I wouldn't recommend it, but any other questions? Good question. I am a ground mount fan. I'm a ground mount fan for a couple reasons. One, it gives you a chance to actually check to make sure everything's still working well. It also allows you to get clear off snow a lot easier. You can see concerns a lot quicker. If you put them on the roof, a lot of times you're stuck to that tilt angle, which may not be the best. You can still clean them off, or you can hopefully wait for the sun to do its job. They shed relatively quickly once they get a little warm, because that's one of the byproducts. One of the problems that they had, the Walmarts and all of them, these big box stores, had a bunch of roof mounts, and they all caught on fire. And because you had squirrels up there putting nests and breaking things down and chewing on lines, and you had Minots chewing on the lines, right? Good Star Wars reference, but they're chewing on the lines and no one was maintaining it. Well, DC is very, very, very flashy, sparky. And so they pulled them all off the roofs. But now it's required to have panel level shutdown at the array that you can shut the powers down. I have multiple of them, which really just says in my head when something goes wrong, I have no idea where it is. But there's multiple shutdowns that I have throughout my house, so you have the ability to shut them down. I always get customers when I'm going out to demonstrate a panel where it's shining outside and we're getting ready to test current when I can, because it's a smaller panel, and I can shoot a spark like this far from the electrode. And they're like, there's really power, and I'm like, yeah, there's power in there. Yes?
What's the average repair cost? Say a timer goes out or an inverter or something goes
Yeah, good question. So a lot of these like Solar Arc and them, they'll sell you a 15 or 20 year extension. I know for mine, they're made to snap in. I can write them, say, hey, I need an inverter, and they'll ship me out, maybe under warranty. But I mean, the unit costs what the unit does, so you can figure the repair cost. But really, solar has no maintenance for the most part. Like you don't have battery, maybe other moving panels. So it's not like wind where you have to worrying about a turbine, and because it's just a transmission, you got to lube maybe U-joints or whatever the wind thing is. So there really should be no long distance maintenance cost that you should be incurring.
So troubleshooting the problem might be just as simple?
Yeah, it depends. A lot of them have LED displays that say fault this or fault that. So for the most part. So, and there's communities for this as well. And so that's where I'd pick it up. Yes?
Recommend nominal battery voltage if you're going to have a battery.
48. Yeah, because that's the largest you can get until you start getting into the higher voltages, which a lot of the lithium guys are. 48 is the biggest. So 26, 12, 36, 24, 12, 36, 48 is what it's called cabin level voltage, because it's what like a lot of the standalones. Because you go as high as voltage as you can, because all the components get smaller and cheaper, and the wire gets cheaper because the current is smaller. So, anybody else? Yes?
Are the government incentives available for self-pay?
Oh, crap. Everyone left, right? Okay. There's a website out there, DSIRE, Desire. If you are doing solar, if you're doing geothermal heat pump, if you're doing a wood-burning stove, if you're changing out panels in your panes in your house, if you're insulating your house, there are all some type of tax credit or whatever incentive you can research. You have federal, you have state, and you have local. Okay? DSIRE. It's a little backwards. In my head, it makes no difference. I think that's what it is. If you type in that and you put incentives, Google will fix my spelling. Yeah, that's in there. And you can type in your address and all of the incentives. Now, they used to have a 30% tax credit. Tax credit is when you get to keep your money. A tax incentive is when you get somebody else's money from the Fed. I think the other one's morally wrong. But if you have an IRA and you're like, hey, I want to use this IRA to build something, but I'm going to get nailed with something if I take it out too early, that's when you use that tax credit so you can get that money back that you already supposed to belong to. Yes?
What was that website again?
DSIRE. Let me look it up, make sure I'm not giving. Type in rebates or federal, or where's my phone? Yeah, there it is. Let me make sure. This is why I have slides normally. I should have been like, well, if you come to. Yes.
You're right.
Yeah, DSIRE. It's dyslexic desire. And all that information's in there. Okay? As far as what you can get back on rebates. Yes?
If you are currently connected to the grid and you don't want to go off grid,
Correct.
do you have to work with your electric company?
You have to follow their rules, whatever they say.
There's a special meter that they put on your house. All they do, you feed your voltage to the power lines. They can come out and do it.
Yeah, and here's the thing with that. You used to have what they call net metering, which means for every watt you produced and gave them, they would give you that watt back in the value of monetary, okay? Net metering doesn't exist anymore, which means that for a lot of people, and there might still be some exceptions, but for a lot of people, let's say for every watt you produce, they'll give you back the credit that they cost to make it, but they still charge you what they charge you for it. So let's say they charge you this is not real numbers, but let's say they charge you 2 cents a watt, and they give you, it costs them 1 cent a watt. That means for every watt you give them back, you get 1 cent worth of credit, but you still have to buy the extra penny to take it back.
Our company though is like, it costs them like 2 cents a watt to buy, and they charge 14 cents.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like 2 and 1.
No, it's just.
a big, yeah.
And then you have to pay for the meter that he was talking about, and then you get to pay for the fees to have it monitored. And so you have to make sure that if you're doing it for financial reasons, that you make that jump to cover all of it.
And if you have an old electrical panel in your house, that has to be updated too.
Yep. Anything else? Okay, so if you want anything going, you can find me on Bean Tree Homesteading. We'll have our classes up there. We have our classes at our off-grid home, so you can see how boring it is. We'll also have classes for the solar greenhouse and the snow and the solar system. I really want to put a class on where people come out and help me install that array so they can get some time underneath their belt and a working system. The classes that we have there, we have an intro class, but we also have a lab class, which will be new to this year, which you will physically be tilting panels and physically hooking up battery cells to create different battery voltages. And you'll be playing with multimeters and charger controllers. I'm up at, sorry, I apologize. I'm up in Mondamon, which is 45 minutes northeast of Omaha. I live up in the lowest hills behind Small's Fruit Farm. Okay, yep, yeah, you guys are north of me. So, yep, you didn't know that, did you?
No.
Okay. Anyways, okay, that's it. Yes, ma'am, yes. Our Facebook page, Bean Tree Homesteading. Normally I have a business card that we have at our booth to pick up, but if you do that, you'll find it. Do not send me a personal request for friend, though. Just go, because you won't like me. Just go to Bean Tree Homesteading.